A lot of these voters are the same. A lot of these are your early vote totals that you're seeing on your screen. You're seeing Mike DeWine with the lead. You're seeing Tim Ryan with the lead. That means there are a lot of people who voted for Governor Mike DeWine and also voted for Tim Ryan. So something to keep in mind. Go further down the ballot in the race for Attorney General. This one's close right now. For now, you think that if you're the Democrats trying to challenge these incumbents that you would want to have a larger lead at this hour. We'll see how these end up playing out. But razor-thin lead for Dave Yost, the incumbent. A razor-thin lead for Frank LaRose that just got a little bit less thin as we refresh the page there. We'll see if Frank LaRose can win re-election and stave off his challengers. For auditor, it is Taylor Sappington fending off Keith Faber, who now we have a beautiful photo of. Appreciate everybody who's working hard behind the scenes to make all of that happen. In the race for auditor, and this one's interesting because you have a Taylor Sappington, a guy who is the first openly LGBTQ major party candidate for statewide office, and he's from Appalachia. So that's a little, he's a very interesting candidate trying to take down Keith Faber, seeking his second term in office. Former Senate president in Ohio, of course, won his 2018 election by a fraction of a couple of percentage points. He didn't get 50% of the vote. He was unopposed in the primary race. So that's a look at some of the down ballot races here in the state of Ohio. We'll continue to circle back to those. Right now, though, as promised, I want to throw things out to 13 ABC's Carly Petrus. She has been with the Tim Ryan camp all night. Carly, we were just checking in with your comrade Willie Danley down in Columbus. You're just outside of Youngstown, Tim Ryan's backyard. Very spirited evening so far in Columbus. Republicans feel good about this. It's Tim Ryan with the early lead. Describe the mood for us there at Ryan HQ.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, the party is just getting started here. Doors opened about an hour ago. I'm going to step out and you can kind of see what's going on around me. People are talking, gathering. There's a lot of optimism in the room, something that Tim Ryan ran with his entire campaign, something he also emulated his whole career as a member of the House of U.S. Representatives. You can hear the music going, there's just a high energy in the room. Now, as for tonight, we know the race is tight, but like you said, he got that early lead, and that's something he really needed. So, stay with us. We're going to keep you updated out here.
Okay, Carly, before we let you off the hook, a couple of more questions. At J.D. Vance headquarters, we saw Governor Mike DeWine. We just saw Rob Portman. We saw Lieutenant Governor Houston. A lot of stars coming out to Columbus. It is the state capital, but that seems to be a major Republican headquarters for tonight. Have you seen any other big names out there, or is this mostly Tim Ryan supporters out there?
We're mostly seeing Tim Ryan supporters, and I think that speaks a lot to the people he was trying to reach to through his campaign. We're not seeing any big names yet, but I think, maybe when we're expecting him later this evening, but you know what? We'll keep you updated.
Perfect. Carly Petrus reporting live just outside of Youngstown in Boardman, Ohio at Mr. Anthony's. We appreciate the time, and we'll check back in with you throughout this evening as you continue to monitor that race. So good reporting there. And interesting what she mentioned about needing what Tim Ryan has been doing this entire campaign as we check back in with the numbers. He hasn't had support from national Democrats that maybe he could have. They were concerned with trying to hold on to some of the seats that they already had. Democrats fighting to stay alive in New Hampshire, in Nevada, in Georgia, trying to flip Pennsylvania. So Ohio fell off the radar for national Democrats. And so you didn't see people coming here to stump for Tim Ryan. You didn't see President Obama or Biden come here to support him like you saw in other races across the country. Tim Ryan, once we got to the end of the campaign, said, I don't need him. I don't want him at this point. Take a listen to what he told us whenever he was asked about not getting that Democratic support.
We don't need him. I'm going to get in without any national Democratic support, which is great, because I won't owe anybody anything. I'll be the most independent senator the Senate has ever seen. We have 415,000 donors. 95% of our contributions are under $100. And J.D. Vance has two donors, a Silicon Valley billionaire and Mitch McConnell, who gave him $40 million. The guy's bought and paid for before he even walks into the Senate. So I feel really good about where we are. Average people are supporting us. The unions are supporting us. Working people are supporting us. That's all we need.
Tim Ryan also went on Fox News for that town hall with J.D. Vance and said that if you want to win these races, you have to go to places where you're uncomfortable, where you're not going to be liked. You have to be able to talk with everybody and anybody, and that's what he's tried to do during this campaign. We will see if it pays off in a state that Donald Trump won by 8 points, that Democrats looked at and said, we don't have a shot here. We have to focus our resources elsewhere. So when Carly said there that, it's his people, it's that really was a good point made by her. J.D. Vance on the other side of this race. We are circling back to him like we said we would. He would be replacing Rob Portman, who has worked in the middle for a lot of his career. Worked with his counterpart here in Ohio, Senator Sherrod Brown. The two of them wrote the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, that helped land Intel here ultimately at the end of the day. The two of them have had a good working relationship. Senator Sherrod Brown told me earlier today he prefers Tim Ryan, didn't really want to talk about what a working relationship with J.D. Vance might look like. But earlier in the campaign, I asked J.D. Vance what he thought of Rob Portman, some of the things he disagreed with him on, how he might be similar or different. Take a listen to what J.D. Vance had to say about Rob Portman.
Yeah, sure. So, one, I think Rob Portman has been an incredibly effective senator for the people of Ohio. So it's not just during the Biden administration, but during his entire career. There's a lot of pieces of legislation with Rob Portman's name on it that I think have been very good for the people of Ohio. Like, there are some issues I disagree with Rob Portman on. We agree certainly more than we disagree. But I think his fundamental model as a guy who cares about public policy and cares about the details of legislation, it's like a really good model to follow. The alternative model is Tim Ryan, who votes to rename post offices but doesn't get anything done. I certainly want to be more of a Rob Portman than a Tim Ryan.
More of a Rob Portman than a Tim Ryan. And part of that, you would say, involves working across the aisle. We'll see what kind of senator J.D. Vance would be if he ends up winning at the end of this evening. I want to get a little more local here. We've talked a lot about that Senate race and a lot about the statewide races in Ohio and some of the ones that are happening in Michigan as well. Let's get a little more local and get to Toledo and Lucas County, and we'll do that in just a second after we address one thing that happened earlier today in the Columbus area. Outside of a precinct, the Secretary of State's Communications Office confirms that there was an individual who was carrying a firearm outside of a polling location. Law enforcement on scene said that this person was adhering to Ohio law. Ohio law now has open carry, constitutional carry. You don't need a permit. You're allowed to walk on the streets with a gun. The Secretary of State's office also says that law enforcement confirmed that this person left by about 6 o'clock, was there for a short time. The voting location manager reported that the individual did not impede voting or attempt to intimidate voters. There were some people on social media talking about this tonight. It was outside of a church that was a polling location in central Ohio. There were accusations that it was voter intimidation, but law enforcement said otherwise. The guy or person, whoever it was not breaking the law, the new law at least, of the land here in the state of Ohio. We'll get to the people who are going to be potentially writing those state laws here in a moment or two after we get you a little bit hyper-local. Let's go into Toledo, let's go into Lucas County and talk about some of the races that you're seeing on the ballot. Among them, county commission race in Lucas County. One of the ones that will be scrolling along the bottom of the screen. And while we're on that topic, let me go back over to the Board of Elections website, as we are now starting to get numbers in from Lucas County, which this could take a while to get all of them in. As we have said, they traditionally have a ways to go from one county, one edge of the county to the other, to get all these results into us. No surprise that the Democrats are leading in a lot of these areas. Again, the early vote numbers, the first ones that come in. Tim Ryan with 73% of the vote compared to J.D. Vance right now. Marcy Kaptur in her race for Congress with almost 80% of the vote, a number that needs to be smaller if J.R. Majewski is going to have a shot in the largest county here in this district. Get to the state house races in a moment, a few races, judges races. County Commission on the ballot. Lisa Sebecki, who ended up leaving her post in the State House to run for county commission. Lisa Sebecki ends up challenging an incumbent in the primary, ends up winning that race, ends up moving on to the general election and faces John Genowine, Sylvania Township trustee. Does this race end up staying like it is as we end this night? It's something we'll have to watch. But if it ends up going red, be the first time since 2002. Lucas County hasn't elected a Republican to countywide office since 2002. There have been 3 Democrats in that post of county commission every year since 2006. Lisa Sebecki could have served another term in the State House, decided to come back, took down Gary Byers, the incumbent, in the May primary, and now we are here where we are today. So we're keeping an eye on that race, in the race for county commission. Also, State Board of Education. This is just the Lucas County total. Teresa Fetter with a large lead. We would expect that to continue into the night. Sarah McGurvey, Catholic school teacher out in Northeast Ohio, challenging her for this spot. Fetter leaving early from her spot as a state senator. The race to replace her is between Paula Hicks Hudson and Tony Dia, the father of slain Toledo police officer Anthony Dia. Paula Hicks Hudson opening with an early, strong lead here, at least in the Lucas County numbers. Our website has a list of all of those as well as we continue to track those. Let's go to more races. You can hit full results here on our website. Scroll down and see a plethora of results as they come in. You'll see them highlighted in gold whenever they're officially called, when there's enough of the vote in that makes it safe to call that race at the end of the night, that maybe there's not enough outstanding vote for the challenger to try and overcome that deficit. Let's search Teresa Fetter. We were just talking about that race. We have a bunch of State House races on here. We may have to do a little bit more digging to come up with that one. Board, unless our search function might not be working. Well, we will work to try and get that up for you here momentarily. Here are the local races. You drop down to more elections. See, I'm glad we're doing this together. More elections. You can search for Ohio's more local races. In Northwest Ohio is the tab that we're on right now. You click this and you can get the statewide, you can get the Michigan elections. These are all of our local races. Imagination Station levy. This is a renewal. Going right now in the right direction for the Imagination Station. We have an Anthony Wayne School District levy. Toledo-Lucas County Library levy renewal. That one's going in the way of the library. Bowling Green School District income tax and bond issue. Early vote leaning toward that right now. This is the big one in Toledo. And I'll circle back to this in just a second. It's issue 21, a charter amendment in Toledo that would change a lot of things for the city government. Again, we'll circle back to that in just a second. Gibsonburg Exempted School Village District, 5-1. Small votes in right now. Metro Parks levy on the ballot. Mid-County Ambulance District levy on the ballot. Several others up and down in Lucas County that we'll continue to keep our eye on as we move throughout this evening. Over to issue 21. This is something that has been pretty heavily debated in Toledo over the past few months as the language was crafted, as the campaigning for it went full steam as we approach this election. It does a lot. It adds another year onto the mayor's term limits, which would allow Mayor Wade Kapsakavich to serve an additional term. He says this isn't about term limits, it's about fixing roads, because that's something else that's on there. It would allow the city greater flexibility to fix and pave and repair more roads. It would get rid of some monotonous things in city government. It would allow the administration to purchase certain things or to go above a certain threshold without having to go to city council first for approval. A lot of things that issue 21 does. The argument was, shouldn't all these be maybe separate issues? They said, no, we're going to lump them all together and we'll see what the voters end up deciding. 13 ABC's Willie Danley's going to come back to get us caught up to speed on the debate over issue 21.
It's kind of hard to say no to volunteer citizens, and I don't know why they lumped them all together. Some people might like that, some people might not, but it doesn't, I don't know that it changes the dynamic.
Issue 21 is on the ballot for next Tuesday. The amendment made and presented to council by a group of citizens includes allowing city funds to improve roads, extending mayoral and council term limits, allowing the mayor's office to spend more without council approval, to removing residency requirements for city employees, and reducing the number of signatures required to initiate an ordinance, among other things. Some people I spoke to around the city of Toledo told me they weren't informed enough about the issue to have an opinion. Others said they don't agree with all 12 changes being lumped together.
I was there at the meeting when they were discussing it. I even spoke and told them that I felt that it was too large of an issue to bundle everything inside of one package, and that I don't think it was going to be successful because people are not going to read that whole amendment.
They entice you with one thing that you might agree on, but if you voted on that one thing that you agree on, then you have to vote on all 12 or the other 11 that you disagree with.
Toledo resident Aaron Woods says he thinks the amendment will benefit some more than others.
If they would break it down so we can decide on what we wanted to vote on. Instead, it seems like it was something that was packaged together so that way it benefit the current sitting mayor, so that way he can have job security for the next 4 years.
I spoke to Mayor Kapsakavich. He says he thinks the citizens who made the amendment may have thought presenting the issue separately would have been confusing. He tells me they're doing what the citizens recommended.
At the end of the day, if you want the city of Toledo to be able to spend money fixing every road in our city, because right now we're only allowed to fix about 75% of the roads, then you'll vote for issue 21.
Willie Danley reporting. Roads the big issue on the ballot in terms of what Mayor Wade Kapsakavich has been publicly projecting. We'll see where that one ends up going. Right now the vote count is still early, but so far more than half of voters have pushed for the amendment button for issue 21 to make a series of changes to the Toledo City Charter. Keeping an eye on some of those national projections, as we've said we would do throughout this evening. Just got an update that Marjorie Taylor Greene will win re-election to Congress in Georgia's 14th. She could end up getting committee assignments again. She didn't have those because a Democrat stripped her of them. If Republicans end up taking control, going to be interesting to see what committee assignment she would get. Also going to be interesting to see if she ends up being on a presidential ticket in 2 years from now. 2 years from now, are we talking about Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene? That certainly seems to be an option for some Republicans. Or will we be talking about Ron DeSantis and whomever his running mate is? That's another option for Republicans looking 2 years down the line. We had told you earlier that Ron DeSantis has clinched his victory, his re-election bid, and is projected to be the winner in that race. So Democrats are faring well right now in New Hampshire in the race for U.S. Senate. That was one state that Republicans were targeting to try and take down. They ended up pulling money out of New Hampshire late in the campaign to send resources to Pennsylvania instead. Governor Mike DeWine expected to speak around 9 o'clock is what we are now hearing. So if we're able to get that back, we will send things back out to you. Willie Danley there at that watch party, and hopefully things will be a little bit more clear on the audio side. If not, we'll be able to give you a debriefing on what we're hearing there. But Governor Mike DeWine, that's the biggest and right now the only race call in the state of Ohio at this hour is that Mike DeWine will win re-election. Let's check back in with the numbers on those statewide races for governor and U.S. Senate in Ohio. Then I'm going to go back over to Michigan. Governor Mike DeWine, a substantial lead right now, 56% of the vote. In U.S. Senate, 54% of the vote going Tim Ryan's way. And this is so interesting because we'll close out of the countdown. This is so interesting because you have voters, a lot of voters it would appear now, who are voting for Mike DeWine and Tim Ryan, who are punching the button for a Democrat to go to the United States Senate and a Republican to go to the governor's mansion. A lot of independent voters in Ohio. Are those the ones that are going to end up swinging this race one way or the other? J.D. Vance has some catching up to do. The night is still very young. The night is still very young. We look at turnout that we had in the general election in 2018. It was a record. by any stretch of the imagination. Turnout numbers were great in 2018 compared to what they normally would be. Not when you compare them to 2016, the election that happened just 2 years before that. But in 2018, during that midterm, when we had 55% voter turnout, we had 4.4 million votes cast total. So 4.4 million votes cast compared to where we are tonight. Tim Ryan's 839,000 to J.D. Vance's 705,000 puts us at 1.5 million votes. So there's a long ways to go. If we get to 4.5 million votes cast by the end of this night, that's still about 3 million outstanding. A lot of things can happen between now and whenever all of those numbers come in. A major night for Republicans on a night when they appear poised to sweep the statewide ballot up and down the ballot. Victories for Republicans. That will be the big story on this midterm election night. Good evening and thanks for joining us on Action News Now on 13abc.com, our Facebook page and mobile app. I am Josh Krupp. Some key projections to deliver tonight, including in the race for United States Senate. ABC News projects that J.D. Vance will become the next United States Senator hailing from the great state of Ohio, defeating Tim Ryan, the congressman who has served in Washington since 2003, unable to take down J.D. Vance at this hour, trailing by 8 points. Vance, the 38-year-old born in Middletown, Ohio, who moved away and ended up coming back to Ohio in 2017, will be Ohio's next junior senator, replacing the retiring junior senator Rob Portman, according to ABC News projections. It has been Rob Portman in the United States Senate since 2011. It has been 652 days since Rob Portman announced that he would not seek re-election. 652 days ago, that set off a chain reaction of events that has led us to the point where we are tonight, that has led us to a J.D. Vance victory. It has been a bumpy road. It included a primary election that literally almost included a fist fight on a debate stage. It included an endorsement from former President Donald Trump 3 weeks before Election Day in April that likely led to J.D. Vance's victory on that May 3rd evening that has propelled him forward to victory today. J.D. Vance only secured 32% of the vote on that May 3rd primary election night. Tonight, he has 54% of the vote, winning over the Republicans who did not support him during that primary race, winning over voters, enough of them to put him in Washington, in a state that the former president Donald Trump won by 8 points in 2016 and 2020. 8 points, the margin of victory right now for J.D. Vance if these numbers end up holding. Tim Ryan has conceded in the race. Per reports, we are standing by live to hear from him. We are also standing by live to hear from the victor in this race, J.D. Vance, at Republican headquarters in Columbus, Ohio. We have seen every major Republican in the state who is on a statewide ballot here at this podium at some point tonight. The first being Governor Mike DeWine, who clinched re-election earlier this evening. Networks calling that race as soon as the polls closed at 7:30. And Governor Mike DeWine holding a commanding lead, 63% of the vote here in the state of Ohio. Loud cheers erupting in Columbus. And you wonder at any moment we could see Ohio's next senator appear for a victory speech. And as soon as, again, that comes, we will take you to there. A big night for Republicans, up and down the ballot. Let's go further down the ballot as we talk about some more races. In the race for Attorney General, it's Dave Yost with 61% of the vote. That 6 at the front, going to be a theme as we move down here. Secretary of State Frank LaRose, 60% of the vote. The auditor, Keith Faber, with 59%. The treasurer's race, the Supreme Court races, all of these races going in favor of Republicans here on this evening. We can now officially project that J.D. Vance will indeed serve as the next senator from the state of Ohio. The Associated Press officially giving it the gold check mark, officially projecting that J.D. Vance has won this race. A live look here at Ohio's election night headquarters for Republicans, where any moment now we can expect J.D. Vance to come out and give his victory speech. J.D. Vance will end up being one of the youngest U.S. senators to serve in Washington. It depends on how a couple of other races end up shaking out tonight. One in Wisconsin, where Mandela Barnes, a 35-year-old Democrat, is trying to unseat an incumbent. One in Arizona, where Blake Masters, a 36-year-old Republican, is trying to unseat an incumbent. J.D. Vance, 38 years old. Say those other two don't make it in. Vance would be the second youngest U.S. senator in the country actively serving in Washington, behind only Jon Ossoff, 35 years old, a Democrat from Georgia. J.D. Vance appears poised to replace Rob Portman, the outgoing United States senator who won Ohio by a larger margin than President Trump did during his last re-election campaign. Rob Portman announcing he is going to retire and step away on January 25th, 2021, November the 8th, 2022. A long time since then, all 652 days since then, we now know who will replace him in Washington, D.C. What's next for the 49-year-old Tim Ryan? We don't know at this point. He has served in Congress since 2003. His first election was 2002. We'll have to see what's next. We'll see if he ends up addressing that in front of his crowd of supporters. We are awaiting to hear from Tim Ryan and could hear from him any moment now. And you would maybe expect to hear from Ryan and then Vance. Don't know if they're exactly going to coordinate those efforts, but we'll certainly keep an eye on that. Tim Ryan currently outside of Youngstown, Ohio, in his current congressional district. Boardman, Ohio, more specifically there at Mr. Anthony's. That's where 13 ABC's Carly Petrus has been all night. We don't see anybody at the podium right now. Carly was describing the mood to us here earlier as one that was a little bit more somber, one that was starting to get a little less enthusiastic as the numbers started to come in. One that started very optimistic and celebratory. One, as you can see now, with an 8-point lead for the Republican J.D. Vance, will not end the way that these supporters envisioned whenever they showed up to Mr. Anthony's in Boardman, Ohio on this Tuesday evening. Let us look into this ballroom here as J.D. Vance, we await the live picture from his event. Tim Ryan taking the stage in Youngstown, Ohio, to admit defeat in this United States Senate contest.